Hello, my name is Matthew, and there's been a great round of conversations going on BookTube and YouTube with all of these top five videos, top five English novels, and then very quickly it spiraled into top five books by guys named Mike, and top five books by gals named Dorothy and Gladys, and it's been a lot of fun. It's an original, lighthearted, uh, spirited way to have the kinds of conversations that are just so enjoyable to have. Favorites. So I thought, in the spirit of all of this, I would do a top five video, my top five books by a guy named Homer. I'm just kidding, of course. Michael K. Vaughan mentioned that he might do a top five list of his favorite ancient works this weekend. I thought that was a great idea, and uh, it gives me an opportunity to show off these this amazing set of Homer, the Iliad, and the Odyssey. And so I thought of my top five um, books or works from the ancient world, and immediately two slots filled up with Homer, the Odyssey, and the Iliad, which it astounds me that something so ancient at the time of ancient Greece, when all the playwrights and historians and philosophers are writing, um, the Odyssey and the Iliad were already considered these ancient works, and they are so strange and so unlikely. Uh, Everybody knows portions of the legends and myths that are in these stories, but when you actually start reading them, it's surprising. The Odyssey doesn't just begin with Odysseus and a seafaring adventure. It takes a while to get into that. The Iliad is even stranger. It's a warring war novel. Um, it's bloody and gruesome. The dramatic arc, or the style of the storytelling, is just very unique, and something that's not uh, particularly specific with Homer, or really any book. I love books in translation. Um, Homer is just a great example because it's been canonical, and lastingly popular for so long that if you enjoy it, there is just a bounty of different translations that you can read. Even if, I'm not able to really parse down line by line, and I don't know the original Greek or anything like that, but you can tell it's a different kind of story being told. There's another voice introduced. And I've read the Iliad and the Odyssey a good many times, and reading different translations, um, just it's like hearing echoes of the same story. Really neat. So, uh, top two books by a guy named Homer. Um, the other slot, which gets filled pretty much immediately after um, Homer, is Herodotus, the Histories, which is one of my, I don't know if I want to say one of my favorite books, but it's one of those books that seems to be on another level. This ancient history book that, after all this time, still feels modern. The storytelling is fresh. Um, you get a sense of a you get a sense of a personality and a voice. Not only Herodotus, but all of the characters that are doing things and misbehaving, and all of the things that go on with Herodotus going around telling and retelling stories. It's intensely human and at the same time larger than life, feels legendary and mythological, and lasting. That's a distinctive mark of so much of the ancient world, especially ancient Greece, what I know, is the lasting power of these works is just amazing. So we have epic poetry, then we have the first history book. We can move on to philosophy, and I just picked up a random collection of Plato's dialogues. This is the Death of Socrates, which is Apology, Credo, Phaedo, and that other one. But my favorite dialogue by Plato is actually Ion. And so when I think about just in general what I like about Plato and the Platonic dialogues, it actually has very little to do with philosophical ideas. I love the literary invention of Socrates, the Socrates that's just on the page, and he's such a character, and brilliantly Plato decides not to just have a dissertation or a lecture, but to frame these dialogues with little stories. That's one of my favorite parts, a part that I'm really impressed with. It was such a novel idea that before the philosophy starts coming out, Socrates is going to bump into someone in the woods and say, "Hey, let's go for a walk." He'll be late to a lecture in a crowd after the lecture has been let out. He'll be on his way to a drinking party. He'll be sentenced to death. And the Platonic dialogues are framed with these little stories with characters that meet and have greetings. They introduce themselves, or they've known each other for a very long time. The other aspect of Plato's dialogues that I like is that they don't button up at the end. They almost always end inconclusively, open-endedly, and it goes to the spirit of Socrates's sensibilities, or a lot of the philosophy, which is, well, I don't know anything. I'm just asking questions. I'm not saying you're right. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just wondering. And so in Ion, it goes back to Homer. So Ion is this guy who is famous for being an expert on Homer and Homer's epic poems. And he has lectures, he gets paid for it, everybody's really impressed with him, he wins contests. Inexplicably, he's only an expert in Homer. Any other kind of poetry or poem, he's not an expert on. Only Homer. And so Socrates meets Ion, and he's explaining, I'm an expert on Homer. And Socrates goes, well, that's great. I've always wanted to meet an expert on Homer. Let's talk about Homer, and let's talk about your expertise. And Socrates just starts undressing every component of this man's argument as to being an expert. And the part that I remember is Socrates says, like, okay, so you know this poem and everything that's in the poem better than anybody else. And then Ion says, yes, 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 I'm the expert. And he says, what about like the seafaring parts? Do you think a sailor would know more about the seafaring parts than you? And Ion, uh, it's a crucial first mistake. Well, I guess the seafaring parts a sailor would know more. And Socrates said, well, what about the warring parts? Do you think a soldier knows more about war than you? And what about the fishing parts? Do you think a fisherman knows more? And all of a sudden, Socrates is saying, well, every part of this poem has some subject where there's another person that's more of an expert. They go back and forth, and it's washing over Ion. It ends with Ion just being completely downtrodden. His whole livelihood, the thing that gives him pride and joy, being an expert, has now just been pulled right out from under him. So now it's dawned on him that he's not an expert at all. Now, Socrates wasn't even saying that. Just asking questions. Well, I don't know. This is just an idea. And so it ends with Socrates just being satisfied and amused. Okay, well that was a great conversation. Thank you. And ends with this guy just being emotionally and intellectually wrecked. And it's my favorite Platonic dialogue. And so we have epic poetry, we have history, philosophy, and we'll end on the stage with drama. And as a whole, I think this is one of the most impressive trilogies or collection of plays. Just one dramatic arc. And it's the Oedipus Cycle by Sophocles. I have this handsome edition. So Oedipus Rex, Oedipus at Colonus, and Antigone. This is translated by Dudley Fitz and Robert Fitzgerald. And I just recently read this, maybe last year. I've read most of the Greek plays, and one of the common themes here is just how everlasting these things feel. Again, this is larger than life and legendary and mythological, and intensely human. It's dramatic. The way the plot kind of folds in on itself like a mousetrap. It's just perfectly done. And tragic, like kind of hits you in a larger sense. The tragedy hits you, not necessarily the specific tragedy that happens in here, but that amazing, inexplicable, huge coincidences, terrible things happen all the time, and your whole world can just turn upside down. And it's told in just in the way of legend, and it's amazing. All these playwrights, Euripides and Aeschylus and Sophocles, it's just amazing. But those are my top 5 books of the ancient world, specifically ancient Greece. Just what I've read. Daphne. The Iliad, the Odyssey, the Histories by Herodotus, Ion by Plato, and then as a whole, the Oedipus Cycle, Oedipus Rex, Oedipus at Colonus, and Antigone by Sophocles. So let me know what you think. This is my top 5 works by a guy named Homer. So thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if you would like. This is great fun. I hope you're enjoying it as well. So thank you and take care.